Cool. As a prospective MP, what is the legacy you would like to see left for the next generation and those beyond?
I think that I'd like to see a planet that everyone can live on, that's thriving, that's healthy, that there's enough resources for everyone, and yeah, that's pretty much the legacy I'd like to leave.
What risks do you think climate change poses to the well-being of young people and future generations of New Zealanders?
I think climate change is the single biggest challenge that our species is facing. In fact, the entire planet is facing. And it's very, very clear from the science that if we don't act now to prevent the worst of climate change, that we're going to be dealing with a completely different planet, and it's going to be one where it's harder to grow food, where there's going to be more frequent storms. It's going to be harder for us to have, good lives.
Do you think the action that New Zealand's government is currently taking on climate change is sufficient and does justice to our future generations? If not, what goals and actions would you push for in the next term if elected?
The actions that the government is taking are definitely not sufficient to deal with climate change. I mean, Simon Terry and Jeff Bertram published a book called The Carbon Challenge, which says that based on the current business-as-usual scenario, emissions will only be reduced by less than 1% compared to if there was no emissions trading scheme. So actually, the emissions trading scheme is almost worse than doing nothing because it's a giant subsidy to polluting industries. I'd like to see a real price on greenhouse gas emissions applied to the polluters instead of taxpayers, so it's not households and business that are paying unless they're the ones emitting. And that's going to give people more choices and more options to reduce their carbon footprint. It's going to enable our economy to become a low-carbon economy and one that's going to sustain us into the future.
In your opinion, is the ETS in its current form an equitable system that delivers sufficient economic signals to emitters? What changes would you advocate to make it more effective, if any?
No, the ETS definitely isn't equitable. It is basically a subsidy to big greenhouse polluters. Some of the big changes that need to happen are agricultural emissions need to be included. Big emitting industries currently get huge breaks in terms of they get free allocations, so they're basically allowed to get a half price, and already the price signal is too low. It's very, very low compared to what we might expect the actual cost of those emissions to be. And finally, at the moment there's a bit of a loophole where there can be some new activities, like for example taking lignite, which is like very dirtiest coal, and turning it into diesel, which is going to have enormous greenhouse gas implications, and it might get away scot-free under the emissions trading scheme. So that loophole needs to be closed.
On that note, what are your opinions on the expansion of fossil fuel industries such as coal and lignite mining and oil and gas exploration in New Zealand? Do you personally support the call for a 10-year moratorium on new coal and lignite developments?
I absolutely support a moratorium on all new lignite coal developments. I think that there's probably going to be a need for some coking coal in our transition to a renewable-based economy, but ultimately we need to be phasing these out now if we ever want to have alternatives and a sustainable economy in the future. And in terms of petroleum exploration, I totally support a moratorium. In terms of petroleum exploration, I completely support a moratorium on deep-sea drilling because it's too dangerous and the industry hasn't proved that they can cause a leak.
What do you see as the main future sources of energy for electricity, transport and heating for New Zealand? Do you support the call for the government to create an action plan to attain 100% renewable energy before 2050?
I absolutely support the call for the government to develop an action plan to be free of fossil fuels by 2050. I think that in New Zealand we're really lucky because we have such a huge supply of renewable electricity. But before we look at just replacing all of our current use of fossil fuels with renewables, the reality is there's a lot of smart things we can do to have an economy and a lifestyle that uses less energy, less electricity, and certainly less energy for transport. So there's a whole mix of things we can do. One is efficiency gains. One is investing in transitioning to renewables. And finally, I think that it's obvious that in New Zealand, the largest part of our renewable mix is going to come from hydro, which already exists, but there's a lot of potential in geothermal, wind, and tidal to make up the rest, and solar.
Do you think the government should be doing more to promote research, development, and deployment of low carbon and more sustainable technologies and practice in New Zealand? If so, what?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of money that can go into research and development. There's tax breaks for renewable or sustainable energy-oriented businesses, and there's education is a big thing we can do. But probably the single biggest thing we can do is get a real price on carbon, because that's going to help people. I mean, we've been able to develop quite a competitive wind energy market without subsidies, but it's not going to be wind as long as we're subsidizing fossil fuel. We're actually holding back our renewable market.
Do you perceive New Zealand's dependence on oil as a risk to our economy in the age of high and increasing oil prices? And do you support the reallocation of spending on new roads towards low carbon and public transport initiatives?
Yes, completely. In fact, as a consultant for MR Cagney, I co-authored a report in 2008 called Managing Transport Challenges as Oil Prices Rise, in which we identified a significant risk to the economy of future high oil prices, and we advocated for a whole suite of initiatives that would basically mean we know that the demand for walking, cycling, taking buses and trains is going to increase, so we don't need to be spending any new money on new motorways. We don't have to increase capacity for vehicles, but there's all these benefits that we can get simply from investing in the alternatives and allowing development to happen at higher densities.
What actions, if any, would you take in your electorate to enable your community to increase their understanding of climate change and to reduce their emissions and dependence on oil?
In the community, there's quite a bit that people can do. I mean, like things like walking school buses and ride sharing, general outreach in terms of education around the challenges that are facing us in terms of an energy supply constraint with oil and also with climate change. We have to be moving to a post-carbon economy, and so transition towns, for example, are really good initiatives that enable people to feel empowered to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels and to start growing those networks that they can use to deal with crises when they happen. So, learning all the skills that we've forgotten or that we didn't learn from our parents, like how to grow your own vegetables in your backyard and how to repair your bicycle. They're small steps, and ultimately we need change at the political level, local government, and especially central government, to enable communities to make the best decisions for themselves. But there's some things that can be done at the community level.
And final question, how can young New Zealanders convince the government to take strong action on climate change?
I think young New Zealanders have to get out and vote. Enroll, vote, get your friends to vote, and also make your voice heard in terms of writing letters and challenging the government to answer questions about why they aren't doing more about climate change, why they aren't doing more to invest in public transport, and why they aren't making smart decisions that they can make right now for us to have a sustainable future here in New Zealand.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks.